Podcast. Igniting both the art and the science of functional medicine. Here's your host, Dr. Brad Watts.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Nutrition Hero Podcast. Hope you had a good weekend, that long weekend, the last weekend of summer. Hopefully you had a relaxing time, and now you're ready to get back on track, get back in the saddle, and get things organized. That's what I love about fall, by the way, is that it's like a new beginnings thing. It's not quite New Year's, right? But there is something about the school year starting back up, and kids being in school, adults having to get back at it, and productivity seems to increase. So I like that. Anyway, welcome back to the podcast. Today, we're going to be going through a couple of different things. One, I'm just going to call it the news, maybe, or headlines. How about that? And we're going to go through a couple of things that have been a little interesting, troubling in the news as it relates to natural health care, and I want to make sure we touch on that. Additionally, we're going to be talking about positioning, and we're going to be talking about how that the use of this skill, and it really is a skill, will change the way that your patients improve. It'll change the way that your practice improves, and it'll change the way that you view natural health care. And no, I'm not talking about position like being the god doctor and stuff like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how you relate to the different pieces of a puzzle in a healthcare setting. And so it's going to be cool. So anyway, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for giving us 5-star reviews on iTunes podcast charts and hitting that thumbs up and subscribe button on YouTube. Appreciate you guys being along for the ride. Remember, Nutrition Hero Podcast is about you developing into that nutrition hero in your community. It's not about me. It's not about any of the guests that I have on the podcast. None of that. Right? This is about you expanding your knowledge and your ability to help people, and even more than expanding your knowledge. There are 900 places for you to expand your knowledge on the internet. Not what I'm talking about. What I'm really talking about is expanding your impact. And one of the things I find is that if you have a ton of knowledge, the only thing holding you back from impact is art. If you have a ton of art form and very little knowledge, obviously we have to improve. And so anyway, what I get so excited about is when I get to hear stories of listeners of the podcast sharing their nutrition hero stories in person. I get to travel all over the country. Every month I'm someplace talking to some group of providers, etc. And I love hearing the stories that they tell when they felt like a nutrition hero, when they changed somebody's life, when they were able to inspire a patient to change their family's life, whatever it might have been. And that's what gets me. That's why we do this, and that's why I enjoy this podcast so much more than just going through rote mechanisms or just doing straight interviews and hearing what everybody has to say all the time. What I want you to get out of the interviews that you hear on this podcast, yes, there's some technical information. Sometimes it's helpful. But what I want you to get, more than anything, is the art of it, the art of the communication. The art of promoting proper function in your patients is not all about knowing mechanisms. It's also about being able to communicate those mechanisms to people intelligently and with tact, right? We're measuring results in impact. We're not measuring results in straight written data all the time. And sometimes impact doesn't fit on a piece of paper. So anyway, welcome to the podcast today. I don't know where that came from. What we're going to be talking about specifically, first and foremost, is the news and a couple of things. There's an article out maybe 2 weeks ago, I think it was, talking about how Amazon failed to test their products or hold the companies that sell products on Amazon to some level of integrity standard. They're failing to test to verify what's actually in the label is actually in the bottle. And that's an amazing situation that's happened right here. So right now, Amazon, from what I understand, is touching about 60%, some estimations are closer to 70%, of the entire supplement industry right now. They get a piece of it, right? 60 to 70% of all supplements, nutritional products, nutraceuticals, whatever you call them, 60 to 70% is being touched by Amazon currently. And if they're not holding people to product standards, that's kind of a scary situation. And so it's just a reminder for all the doctors out there. If you're recommending products to people, make sure that your products are third-party verified. Make sure that your products have sourcing information so you know where it comes from, even to what farm it goes to. That's what I'm talking about. And making sure that your patients are consuming nutrition that has their best in mind, not just the dollar on the other end of it. And that was an interesting article. If you didn't read it, just Google it. Amazon dietary supplements, and you're gonna find quite a bit. This actually is out of the Wall Street Journal, now that I remember. So WSJ.com. Dig in there. Additionally, there's been a lot of information out lately as to lead exposure. Lead exposure. Now, lead exposure is nothing new to people in the functional medicine industry. A lot of people spend an entire career teaching patients how to detox from this kind of stuff. But one of the things that the Lancet, the medical journal The Lancet, published recently is that over 350,000, their estimate is 400,000 on the high side, but over 350,000 Americans a year are dying because of lead exposure. That is an amazing number. That is an amazing number. Now, lead exposure is not necessarily going to be labeled as the cause of death. Why? Because of all lead exposure is way upstream compared to all of the things that people go to the doctor for, right? Neurological diseases and stuff. So when you look at the toxicity versus vitality, maybe there's a curve out there in some journal, toxicity versus vitality. That relationship between both of those things is very interesting to me as a functional medicine provider, understanding that toxicities have to be removed, or at least maintain some level of exposure that the body can deal with, right? But 400,000, that's a lot of people, man. Lead, 400,000 people. And this is not some conspiracy theorist. This is the Lancet, for crying out loud. My goodness. So when we talk about where's this stuff coming from, well, drinking water, obviously. Agricultural products, obviously, and this is an amazing development. And what's interesting is I think you're going to see more and more people from a national perspective, right? The government gets involved in stuff, and then they tell you what you're going to do. But from a national perspective, I think that the government's going to have more oversight on lead control, because you can't have too many of these studies coming out before you start freaking out and having pushback. The next part of the podcast that I want to go through today is talking about positioning. And positioning, there are many different ways to look at this topic, many different ideas that people have, and certainly you're deploying many of these different philosophies and positioning every single day in your practice. And that's one of the problems, is that there's no written roadmap for how you operate in most practices. Right? It creates chaos when you constantly change positioning over and over and over, and you wonder why you have like 6 patients getting better, 6 patients that are still ill, and 6 patients that are treading water in the middle somewhere. And it's because of the positioning with each case is not consistent. And so we're going to talk about positioning today. It's something that I found a long time ago to be very helpful in organizing not only my thought process, but organizing clinical reality of patients that get better, patients that can't get better, how to tell the difference between the two of them, and hopefully how to help the ones that can't get better break through the cycle and move in the right direction. Now, a lot of this information came from mentors of mine. A lot of this information came from experience and just trial and error, getting run over by very sick patients that outpaced skill level at the time. And those are tough lessons to learn, but they're valuable lessons to learn. So as we begin talking about this, I have a story for you. And so this story happened maybe 9 years ago. I had just moved home with my wife of a year and a half, 2 years, from Colorado. And I live in Minnesota, and that's where my family is, and that's where I grew up, etc. We had just moved home and left Colorado kind of with our tail between our legs, looking for a new adventure, but the practice we were working for got sucked up into a bunch of witch hunt lawsuits that never actually manifested into anything. So anyway, we moved back to Minnesota. We have this nice place, living in a nice little apartment that we're renting, and I decided, you know what? I'm taking a sabbatical. Yes, me after a year and a half of my career, I'm ready for a sabbatical, and so I decided I'm not going to do anything in functional medicine for 6 months. Nothing. Not even going to read about it. Not going to think about it. I'm going to go work odd jobs, maybe if I have to, but we have a little bit of money that 6 months, we can do 6 months of me not having to go work for somebody else. So one day, I'm sitting around, I'm bored, I'm gaining weight, because obviously sabbatical means just sitting around and drinking wine, right? And I'm gaining weight, and I'm like, what is going on with my life? Here I am, student loans, newly married, living in an apartment, want to have a family, want to have a business, want to get out and like help people. That little part inside of me that, when you reach out to help somebody and they bite the hand and you're like, all right, well then just stay sick. I gotta be honest, I had that going on in my life at that exact moment. Fine, be that way, stay sick, see if I care, that type of thing. And that's not a good spot to be in when you're tasked with loving on people and helping people unwind chronic disease. And so anyway, I got up one day and I answered an ad on Craigslist. And in Craigslist, the ad was needed help moving. And they're looking for 3 guys. Okay, I just figured it was, some older gentleman and his family that are moving that needed help loading stuff into a truck. So I answered the ad. They email me back, and it's, a Gmail account that says, just meet me at this address, and we'll at this time and date, and thank you. All right, I'm game for that. So I wake up early a couple of days later, and I drive 25 minutes to the address, and it's in this warehouse district. And so I show up at the door and I walk in. There are 150 people in there, I bet. 150 guys. All answered the same ad. And what are they there for? It was a moving company. Semis everywhere. Right? And I'm curious. I walk in. And that scene in the movie Elf when he goes into the mailroom and he says, looks like everybody wants to hurt me and smells like mushrooms. That's literally what I felt like in that moment. Is I walked in, and I must have been the last one there. I don't know. I walk in, and everybody, the door squeaks, and it's kind of quiet in there, and everybody turns and looks at you. And the guy at the front of the room, gruff, big beard, and just, barking out orders, and he's like, sit down. Okay. Yes, sir. Sit down on the little picnic table style bench thing that was in there, and he starts calling off names, and he calls off my last name, and he says, you're in the green truck, right? So I don't know, what's the green truck? I don't know. So I walk out the door where everybody else had been walking out into this massive truck garage where they're working on all the trucks, changing the oil, making the tires work and all the stuff. So I go out there, and sure enough, there's a truck that has a sign on it that says green truck. And so I go get in this green truck. Literally nobody's talked to me yet other than that one guy. I signed my name on a little check-in sheet, and that was it. So I walk out there. It's me and 6 other guys, and we pile in the back of this semi. This old guy gets in, and he's ornery and angry. I have no idea why he's so angry, right? Gets in. And it's a bunch of young guys in the back of this semi-truck. It was a double cab semi. And so we're all buckled in there. This guy gets in there, and it's sweltering hot. It's in August. And we start driving down the road. And it's 5 a.m., so I'm kind of dozing in and out, trying to figure out where we're going. He gets on the interstate, and he points it south toward Iowa, right? And we drive. And we drive. And we drive. And I'm like, what is happening right now? Nobody's talking to him. We're all just kind of looking at each other, and I speak up and I go, where are we going? And the guy starts mumbling underneath his breath, and he's like, rah, rah, rah. He swerves off the interstate, takes an exit, stops at a gas station, and he says, you're gonna need food. So we go into the gas station. I buy a bunch of snacks and stuff, and bottle of water, and I put them in my backpack, and I get back in the truck. And I'm like, ask him again, where are we going? And he's like, we're going to go move some university back in, right, for the fall semester. Okay, well, I don't know what that means. So we drive south. We're in southern Minnesota now, and we go to this university system set up, and they got all these semis loaded with dorm furniture and stuff like that. So what I signed up for is to unload 5 semis into 3 dormitories loaded with this like heavy duty industrial furniture, no elevators or nothing, right? So it's me and a bunch of dudes. So I was in one of, I think 4 or 5 trucks that pulled in that day. So we get out and we start basically carrying this furniture that requires all of the strength that I have up these 3 flights of steps. And so you take everything out of the truck, and desks and bunk beds and dressers and these huge chairs and stuff. Take all the stuff, you climb it up, mattresses, that was the other one, all the way up to the 3rd floor, and you load the 3rd floor up first and then on down, right? And so me, deconditioned, because I've been sitting pouting in my apartment now for a couple of months, and just trying to figure out, what's my plan? Do I want to open a practice? What do I want to do? So I'm deconditioned at this point. And I'm, unfortunately, carrying this stuff up the steps, working for $11 an hour or whatever it was that day. And 3 hours in, I had given everything I have. 3 hours in, everything I have. And it's like 10 a.m. at this point. I'm supposed to be there till 6. Every single ounce of energy that I had, I ate all of the food I brought with me. All of it, right? Lifting so much stuff that I started to get muscle spasms, like in my forearms, my biceps, my back, my calves from climbing all this stuff. They started to seize, and like my hands started pronating, right, and then flexing at the wrist in a cramp style, like I couldn't uncramp them, so to speak, right? So I'm sitting there, functional medicine doctor, right, and I'm sitting there hustling up these steps with all these people, and I'm the only one that's not out for a smoke break every like 15 minutes, because really what they're doing is they're trying to conserve their energy, because they know what's up for the rest of the day. I don't. Turns out all of these guys that I'm working with, standard, right? This is what they do every day. I had to steal somebody's Gatorade when they weren't working, or when they weren't looking rather, so I could make it to lunch, right? A few slugs of Gatorade, 3 drinks down, all of a sudden my muscles started relaxing, and I was like, oh, thank God. I have a little bit of like electrolyte support back in my body. And no joke, you guys, I was so afraid of what the afternoon held that at lunchtime, all I did, I ran to the school cafeteria to buy a bunch of stuff, 5 Gatorades, and put them all in my backpack, and I was eating those the rest of the day just to make it to the end of the day. Now, on that lunch break, I walk back. All these guys that do this for a living are basically sitting in the grass in the shade, trying to cool off and relaxed. And one guy sitting there, he's maybe 30, 35 years old, leaning back, and he like starts snoring. And I'm sitting in the grass looking at this guy, and me, just analytical brain, right? All I've been doing is treating patients in a functional medicine setting for the last year and a half. And these patients in a functional medicine setting, 5,000 of them. Like, my wife and I were tasked with patient care in the largest functional medicine practice that I know of in the entire country. And looking at this guy, I'm just analyzing everybody, and you do it too. You do. Analyzing what pathology do they have? What's the dysfunction here? How are they, how could they improve their life? And this guy's snoring in the grass. He wakes up, and he just, like, to nobody, blurts out, "Man, I'm so tired after I eat. Every day I snooze for like 20 minutes after I fall asleep. What's that called?" And me, just sitting next to him in the grass, I'm like, "Yeah, I think they call that diabetes." And he's like, "Effing no, they don't." Stands up, walks over to me, and he's like, "Where do you get off, smart boy?" Right? And he's like, starts like getting in my face a little bit and talking to me about, "It's not diabetes. Don't tell me that I have diabetes. What do you know?" and all this stuff. And I just sit there and keep my mouth shut looking at him like, oh, Lord, what is going on? So anyway, this guy now, he's animated at me. And in the afternoon, I get some like energy surge because I just pounded 3 of those Gatorades for lunch. And in the afternoon, we're carrying these things up to the second floor of the next building now, carrying mattresses. And so I got like a little bounce in my step again. And they're all just like run down. They have spaghetti and like Hot Pockets for lunch. Of course you're going to be tired. And so I have a bounce in my step, and they stop me in the hallway. They corner me in one of the stairwells. 2 of them. They stop and they're like, look, dude, you need to slow down. We do this for a living, and I don't want our boss to look at what you're doing and think that we should all be working this much. And I wasn't working this much. I just had a little bit of extra bounce because I wasn't on the Hot Pocket diet, right? What they're basically saying to me is that they're not going to put out as much effort as I am because they have to come back and do it again tomorrow. But guess what? Guess who wasn't willing to hear that because of positioning? Once again, what did I think? Well, you lazy SOB, right? Come on, man. Work harder. No, this is the problem with America, right? And you can get on your high horse and all this stuff. That's the problem. So they couldn't hear, this one dude couldn't hear about diabetes from me because of positioning. I couldn't hear, right? This guy warning me, basically, without warning me, that it's not going to be good. You're not going to be able to do this again. I couldn't hear it because of his positioning, okay? So guess what? That dude probably has diabetes right now, and I couldn't walk for 3 days after we did that. Those were the terrible results from 2 people trying to communicate with each other without having any positioning in either direction. I could have helped that guy. In fact, I've helped thousands of people like him over the last couple of years. The problem is that he wasn't willing to hear it because of the position that I was in. What if I opened my mouth and be like, yeah, I'm a doctor. Yeah, I help people with diabetes. Yes, sir, you actually do look like you have insulin resistance at the very least. He's not going to be able to take that information because of who it was coming from in the position that person was in. And that was a really humbling lesson to learn in that time period. But what was really interesting is that this happens every day, right? Long story longer. This happens every day in your practice. Patient walks in and there you are wearing your golf shirt and jeans and trying to deliver them some scientific reason for why they don't feel well and their eye twitches. And they're looking at you like, whatever, dude, just adjust my back and get out of here. And you can't deliver it to them because of positioning. There's no respect that's there because, 1, either you're not setting yourself up for it, or 2, maybe you haven't earned it with that patient yet. And this is critical. So when it comes to positioning, there are a couple of things that I want to put pieces of the puzzle on the table. Number 1, doctor positioning. You can't be an arrogant psychopath, right? Arrogant psychopath, great for surgeons, great for people that are going to be doing things while you're unconscious. But if you got to share words with people back and forth, come on. Right, you have to be able to be in communication with people and in participating with some level of love or at least respect. So that's the first thing. Second thing is the patient has to be willing to take control in a functional medicine setting, has to be willing to take control over their lifestyle. If they can't, they're not going to hear what you have to say. That has to be part of your weeding out process. In weeding out, I mean, can I help this person or can I not? They have to be willing to take control of their lifestyle. And that's really important. Third thing is that you have this innate intelligence, this power that heals the edges of a cut together in the human body. You have to relate to that thing. You have to position yourself to work with innate intelligence rather than trying to be smarter than innate intelligence, right? So when you look at a lab, you have to say, what is this person up to and why is their body not healing? Right? And then I want to let innate intelligence out of the basement if we can and let it start to heal their body. How? By giving it the building blocks it needs to work with, by giving it the nutrients that are consistent with health and healing rather than nutrients that are consistent with whatever death and disease manifestation they have currently. These are 3 different areas of position that are super important to analyze in every patient case. Not some, not the ones that you're interested in, really spending time on every patient case, whether you're giving them an adjustment, muscle testing them, or running labs to have a functional medicine workup with them. Positioning is key. Positioning is key. Now, one of the things that I find a lot of value in is when you have patients that are into like taking on their role in positioning as well. When they say, I'm willing to control my lifestyle, I'm willing to learn, I'm willing to implement, and I'm willing to get better. I'm willing to get better is an interesting one. Sometimes people get things out of being sick. Not everybody, right? Not everybody by any means, but sometimes people do. And I've met a few of them in my career. I've met a few of them. Sometimes when positioning is out of place, there are people that you end up not helping that you could have. Sometimes when positioning is out of place, that you end up trying to help people that you shouldn't have. People that are just taking advantage of a situation, or people that are, for lack of a better term, in love with their current situation, and if you take that situation away from them, they don't know who they are. That's a hard conversation to have. Right now, you're probably thinking, well, there are a few that I shouldn't have taken on that I thought I could help but couldn't, certainly. And there's probably many more that you didn't take on that you could have helped with proper positioning. And so this is key. So the positioning that I want to talk about ongoing here today is this positioning in relationship to innate intelligence. The other positioning situation, you got business development leaders and all this stuff, they can help you with that. What I'm talking about is healing stuff. So positioning to innate intelligence. This is key. There's this cancer, for lack of a better term, in healthcare. A way of relating to the human body where we treat it like it's a car. Have you ever gotten a new car and you drive it around a little bit and it starts to have a little bit of a personality, right? And you take it to a mechanic and you're like, well, I think I understand this car. I understand what the knock means, or when I hear that squeak, I know what it is. And you try to tell the mechanic, and the mechanic's like, all right, bye-bye. Let me do my job. And then they tell you, like, there's 19 things that need to be changed and all this stuff. And you're like, no. I seriously think that it just needs to be something with the tire. And they're like, no, it's the alternator and all. What happens is you have a relationship with that quote unquote personality of an inanimate object, but you have a relationship with the personality of that car. The mechanic doesn't. Think about how your patients feel when they have a relationship with the personality of their body. They show up into your practice, and then you get somebody that is not interested in exploring that personality. Not interested at all, right? And you just look at the straight data, and you're like, oh, it's this, it's that. You need to do all these things, and the patient's looking at you the same way that you would look at the auto mechanic when they're trying to tell you it's an alternator and all the other stuff, and you're like, dude, the tires, there's something wrong with the tire. And that same style of frustration shows up. But how much more? Because we're not talking about a car that you can replace. We're talking about your body. That relationship to innate intelligence. If we can get providers in the healthcare space to start looking at how the body heals and why it's not healing, rather than how the body gets sick and like pathologies and falling in love with pathologies, you are going to flip the script on chronic disease in the United States, right? It's going to be amazing. And this is a very, very delicate, or like it's an artistic topic. Most people have a hard time right now identifying or naming what is life. Why does your heart beat? Most people, like, what is consciousness? Scientists can't even talk about these things without going off the rails and arguing with each other, because there's so much disagreement about how to define consciousness or how to define what creates the heartbeat, that type of thing. And this is amazing to me, because this is the thing that we should be relating to when it comes to natural health care, any health care, helping people heal. So when we talk about positioning, I don't want to give you too many answers today. What I want to do is I want to stimulate some exploration for you. I want you to get excited about relating to innate intelligence again. so that when your next new patient walks into the practice and they sit down in front of you, you're not looking at their blood sugar meter as a representation of who they are. What I want you to do is I want you to look past that, right? Those details are important, but I want you to look past it. I want you to look at the life of their body, that innate intelligence that's like trying to do its job. And I want you to see it for what it is and figure out how to work with it. If you align yourself in that position in a functional medicine setting, there's no telling what you can do. You could change your community, right? You get 5 or 10 of those people in a community that are willing to look at that ability to heal the edges of a cut together with some level of relationship, right? That's making sure that we're living healthy lives, not just cleaning up disasters because we don't know what a healthy life is. That's so cool. Thank you guys for listening today. I want you to dig in. Just write it down. Put it on a note card. I want you to put it someplace that you see it every day. And I want you to find out what innate intelligence is up to. Figure out what's your position to innate intelligence. Do you ever use it? Do you ignore it? Right? Or are you actively working against it? There's only 3 choices. And so I want to make sure that I expose this to you. You have the capacity to work with innate intelligence in every living human being. Right? It's so cool. Right? Because it's the same thing that's operating in your body. Figure it out. Find out what your relationship is like to it. We'll have more episodes, I'm sure, on this later on. We'll actually give you some information that's actionable. But for this one, I just want to get you questioning. Hopefully that's what's happening. Thanks for tuning in to the Nutrition Hero podcast, you guys. Blessings.